Good morning. Time for news and coffee. And I want to start out by just walking through an analysis written by a guy named Anshel Pfeffer. And then I want to move on to talk a little bit about the response Iran mounted against Israel for blowing up its consulate in Damascus. And then I want to just have a quick look at the financial implications of what an exchange like that over time could look like. But just jumping into the analysis here by Anshel, I thought it gave a really interesting insight into Israeli psychology and maybe a few hints as to whether they are deluded or not. So, Anshel says that Israel made mistakes on Gaza, but it has more to lose on Iran. And basically, what his contention is that it's sadly ironic, but the only thing Israel needs to gain the sympathy of the world is to be under attack. And Iran, with its 300 plus drones and missiles fired at Israel in the early mornings of Sunday morning, in the early hours of Sunday morning, gave it just that they got a do over. And the reason they got a do over was because the West was back on their side. And this kind of speaks to this attitude you will see, or that you might have seen among Israelis recently, that they believe they are only liked, they are only valued when they are being victims. And this is one of these memes that I think it was made very popular by like people like Golda Meir, for instance, who said that the world only loves us when we're the victims. It's really been inculcated into their culture. But he goes on to say that, and he's talking about the October 7th here. There's one more thing the day after the Iranian attack has in common with the day after October 7th. Both events were preceded by a failure among Israel's intelligence community and leadership to properly assess the enemy's intentions. And he goes on to say that the first time it was the assessment that Hamas was deterred and focused on trying to bolster its hold over Gaza rather than attacking Israel. This time, it was the belief that Iran would stick to its decades old policy of using its proxies to attack Israel rather than to do so directly. It was this belief that guided the decision to launch the April 1st attack on the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus, killing 7 senior officers from the Revolutionary Guards. And here's where I think that Anshel is suffering from Judeo dementia, as Norman Finkelstein would put it. Anshel does not seem to believe that Netanyahu is trying actively to widen the scope of the war by provoking Iran more and more by attacking Iranian targets in the neighboring countries. He actually believes that there is some sort of rationale here that goes into thinking about these things and just kind of coming to the wrong conclusion, which is really, really interesting to me. But he also goes on to say that basically, Anshel, and this is another part where I think he's deluded, is that he thinks that since the attack by Iran on Israel, that people have miraculously like shifted sides. You know, first they started out being pro-Israeli, then they moved on to being pro-Palestinian because Israelis did too much violence, and now that the Jews are victims again, everybody's gone back. And that's simply deluded, in my opinion. Because, sure, our politicians might come out and condemn Iran, but every single reasonable person who has swapped sides, if you were pro-Israeli from the beginning and you have become pro-Palestinian afterwards, is because you actually looked under the hood and you saw what this genocidal apartheid regime actually is. And like Mate says, Gabor Mate's son, I can't remember what his first name is, it's a one way door. Once you've gone from being pro Israeli to being pro Palestinian, you will never go back because you've seen the true evil that Israel is. So, as far as I'm concerned, people like Rishi Sunak, like Macron, like whomever it is that has stepped up and condemned Iran while the world watches and sees the crimes Israel commits in complete and utter disregard of international law, people actually understand now that the rules-based order does not exist. It only applies whenever these people want it to apply. And I don't think these people will get much favor next election cycles, whenever those are. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to have a quick look at the Iranian attack on Israel, or the response, rather. So this was an article by CBS News, what Iran launched at Israel in its unprecedented attack and what made it through the air defenses. And I found this pretty interesting because, so first of all, we have that the Israeli Defense Force reported very little damage from the attack. And another point that I found that I actually reacted to was, for the first time in Western media, have I seen a non-Jewish person in this conflict be regarded as a human being. Like, a child is actually a child instead of a young adult or some other clinical language that was dictated by the Israeli censor. So a 7-year-old girl who was severely injured by shrapnel was the only known casualty in the attack. The child from a Bedouin village in Israel's southern Negev desert was still fighting for her life on Monday. This is the first time I've read Western media and actually seen a non-Hebrew person be referred to as a human being, actually be humanized. It's interesting that that only happens in the context of something hitting Israel rather than Israel bombing the crap out of something else. Just continuing on. So the mix of weapons that were used seems to have been 120 ballistic missiles, 170 drones, and 30 cruise missiles. And out of that, they report that about 5 of these hit their targets or got past the defenses. Now, this is being painted as a massive win for Israel. But let's just remember, Iran gave the US 72 hours notice in order for them to prepare their defenses to minimize the damage, in order to hopefully not give Israel enough of a reason to respond again so that they can end this cycle. And Al Jazeera, more or less, kind of agrees. So, according to Netanyahu, he says that Israel will win. But I found it pretty interesting. So the numbers are 100% correct. Al Jazeera actually has this really cool infographic as well on the different types of weapons as well as their range. And we can see that there's a number of things in the arsenal of Iran that can reach Israel. And we've already seen that some of these ballistic missiles, all these Bs, can make it through and they can actually penetrate the defenses. A multi-layered defense that's also supplemented by jet airplanes when it's fully loaded, fully ready, and it knows that the attack is coming. So you have to ask yourself the question, what happens when they don't know? Now, it's reported in the New Arab that Israel's defense against Iran's missiles and drone attack cost over $1 billion. Now keep in mind, every single year, I believe, that the US supplements or sends $3.8 billion worth of aid to Israel. This ate 1/4 of it in just one night. And the cost probably for Iran's attack wasn't that much. I think the most expensive piece of kit that they have in their arsenal, when it comes to the ballistic missiles and the cruise missiles, costs about $100,000. That's the estimated cost of it. A lot of these drones estimated to cost around $20,000 to $25,000 to make. So even if we say that every single piece of kit that they sent cost 100 grand, and they sent about 300 payloads. That's 100 grand times 30. 100 grand times 10, or sorry, 100 grand times 300. There we go. That's what could that be? 30 million? You spend 30 mil, you get a return on investment of 1 bill. That's not sustainable in the long term. And Israel's multi-layered air defense system, and remember, this was supplemented by jet aircraft as well as being supported by other Arab nations and the U.S. So they have the Iron Dome, which is everybody's heard of the Iron Dome. Each missile costs about between 25 to 40 grand, but it's developed literally for short-range rockets. Then you've got the Patriot system, which now is used to shoot down aircraft and drones. Then you've got David Sling, and here's where it starts getting really expensive. I think that each David Sling missile costs about $1 million. I think the Arrow, similar price range, between $1 million to $3.5 million. And just on that, Politico had an article that was released just before the shift of the year. And Lloyd Austin actually said that this is not sustainable over the long term. Now, I just ran this through an ROI calculator, so let's assume that the invested amount is 25 grand for a drone, and then it'll cost you like 2 mil or so to shoot it down. You've got a pretty high return on investment in the thousands. So if we took a one night attack and we extended that in time, let's say that Iran's attack continued for months on end or weeks on end, which I'm pretty sure that they have the stockpiles to do, we would probably see Israel go bankrupt pretty damn quick. We'd see the US run out of material pretty damn quick. And we'd start to see the Ukrainian front suffer as well because of the material. And given the choice between Ukraine and Israel, I'm pretty sure that the US is going to go for defending Israel. Now, one night cost approximately $1 billion. The Israeli Defense Force annual budget in 2021 was $24.3 billion. So 1/24th approximately of the IDF's annual budget was eaten in one night. It's worth thinking about. Anyways, I'm done with my coffee, so I'll catch you tomorrow morning. Adios.